What would you do if you found yourself locked inside your school, lights flickering, hearing faint whispers echoing through the hallways? School lockdowns are meant to keep us safe, but sometimes they turn into real-life nightmares. Join me as I dive into some of the most chilling school lockdown stories that actually happened and share my thoughts on how I would handle those spine-tingling situations. Welcome to Hauntline, where we uncover the creepiest stories that blur the line between the natural and supernatural. Today's episode takes us into the heart of educational institutions, schools, places where we're supposed to feel safe, but sometimes become the stage for the unimaginable. We're talking about real-life school lockdowns that turned eerie, filled with unexplained events, shadowy figures, and terror that left students and staff scarred for life. Buckle up, because these stories are not for the faint of heart. School lockdowns are every student and teacher's worst nightmare. Originally designed to protect against threats like intruders or emergencies, these moments of forced confinement create a unique kind of fear, being trapped in the unknown. What happens when the threat isn't just a person but something far more sinister? These lockdowns remind us of how fragile our sense of safety can be and how quickly fear can grip us when the familiar turns into the horrifying. Story 1. The Shadow in the Hall. It started like any other Friday afternoon at Jefferson High School. The clock was ticking toward 3:30 p.m. The last bell was minutes away, and most students were already packing their bags, eager to start the weekend. That's when the lockdown alarm blared through the intercom system. At first, everyone assumed it was a drill. The school had done plenty of them before, and while inconvenient, they were standard procedure. Teachers calmly directed students to the designated safe zones of their classrooms, locking doors, pulling shades, and shutting off lights. In room 204, the atmosphere was no different. Ms. Walker, a seasoned English teacher with over 20 years of experience, quickly locked the door and instructed her students to sit in silence under their desks. "Stay quiet. This will be over soon," she whispered reassuringly, though something about the suddenness of the alarm made her uneasy. Drills were always announced in advance, and this one had come out of nowhere. The class sat in silence, their breathing the only audible sound. The hallway outside, which had moments ago been filled with laughter and the sound of slamming lockers, now felt like a vacuum, eerily still and devoid of life. It was Emma who first noticed the noise. Positioned closest to the door, she thought she heard faint, deliberate footsteps in the hallway. She craned her neck toward the door, straining her ears. A chill ran down her spine when the footsteps stopped directly outside their classroom. "Ms. Walker," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible. "I think someone's out there." Ms. Walker furrowed her brow, tiptoeing toward the door. She peered through the small window in the center but saw nothing unusual. The hallway was empty, just rows of lockers and dim lighting. She shook her head, motioning for Emma to stay quiet, but Emma wasn't convinced. A few minutes later, she heard it again, a slow, rhythmic tapping, like someone running their fingers along the metal lockers. This time, other students noticed it too. Jacob, Emma's lab partner, shot her a nervous glance. "Did you hear that?" Emma mouthed. Jacob nodded, his face pale. The tapping grew louder, more deliberate, as if whoever, or whatever, was making the sound wanted to ensure they were heard. Then, without warning, the tapping stopped. The silence that followed was almost worse. Suddenly, the doorknob rattled violently. Several students gasped, while Ms. Walker held up her hand, signaling them to remain still. She backed away from the door, her face tense with fear. The rattling continued, loud enough to echo throughout the room, before it abruptly ceased. Then, as if on cue, the fire alarm blared. The sharp, shrill sound of the alarm startled everyone, breaking the tense silence. Some students instinctively began to move, but Ms. Walker stopped them. "No," she said firmly. "Stay where you are. This might be a distraction." The fire alarm lasted for 30 seconds before cutting off as suddenly as it had started. The room plunged into silence again. That's when Emma's eyes were drawn to the window on the door. Something was standing there. At first, she thought it was a person, but the figure wasn't right. Its face was unnervingly pale, almost like porcelain, and its eyes were hollow black pits that seemed to absorb the dim light around it. The edges of its form shimmered, almost as if it were vibrating or flickering like a bad TV signal. Emma's blood ran cold. She let out a muffled scream, slapping her hand over her mouth to keep quiet. "What is it?" Jacob whispered, noticing her panic. Emma pointed to the door, her hand trembling. Jacob followed her gaze. His face turned ashen as he saw the figure too. The shadowy figure didn't move, didn't try to open the door. It just stood there, staring into the classroom. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as the students and teachers sat frozen in terror. Then, without warning, the figure turned and began walking away. Ms. Walker crept toward the door, trying to get a better look, but by the time she peeked through the window, the hallway was empty once again. Moments later, the principal's voice came over the intercom, his tone calm but firm. The lockdown has been lifted. Students and staff may now resume their normal activities. No one in room 204 moved right away. They sat in stunned silence, processing what had just happened. Finally, Ms. Walker instructed the class to gather their things and prepare to leave. As they exited the room, the students couldn't help but glance nervously down the hallway, half expecting to see the shadowy figure lurking nearby. But there was nothing. Later that day, rumors spread like wildfire. Some students claimed they had seen the figure too, describing the same pale face and hollow eyes. Others dismissed it as a shared hallucination or a prank, but no one could explain the fire alarm. According to the janitorial staff, it hadn't been triggered manually or electronically. It had simply gone off without cause. Weeks later, a chilling piece of information came to light. Decades ago, a student had died in the school under mysterious circumstances. The story was vague. Some said it was an accident. Others whispered about something more sinister. The location of the incident? The very hallway where room 204 was located. To this day, the events of that lockdown remain a mystery. Was it a prank? A collective moment of hysteria? Or had the past returned to haunt Jefferson High, reminding everyone that some places never truly forget their history? Story 2. The Crying in the Gym. It was a cold winter morning at Westfield Middle School, and the day had started like any other. Students shuffled into their classes, bundled in coats and scarves, while the first period bell echoed through the halls. But by mid-morning, the normal routine was shattered. The principal's voice came over the intercom, tense and hurried. "Attention students and staff. The school is now in lockdown. This is not a drill. Please proceed to your designated lockdown locations immediately." In the gymnasium, Coach Andrews had just finished setting up for a basketball practice session with his PE class. The group of 15 students froze at the announcement. Some nervously glanced at one another, while others whispered questions. "Everyone to the storage room," Coach Andrews instructed firmly, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. The gymnasium's storage room was a cramped, windowless space filled with basketballs, folded bleachers, and gym equipment. The students piled in, whispering anxiously, while Coach Andrews locked the door and turned off the lights. "Stay quiet," he whispered. "This'll be over soon." For a while, the only sounds were the shallow breathing of the students and the occasional creak of the gym's heating system. But then, faintly, they heard something else. It started as a soft, distant sound, like someone crying. At first, the students thought they were imagining it, but as the minutes passed, the sound grew louder and clearer. It was unmistakably the sound of a child sobbing, echoing through the gym. "Do you hear that?" one student whispered to Coach Andrews, his voice trembling. Coach nodded, his brow furrowed. He leaned closer to the door, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound. It seemed to be coming from somewhere inside the gym. The crying grew louder, and now it wasn't just crying. There were occasional gasps and hiccups, like whoever it was couldn't catch their breath. The sound was heart-wrenching and eerie, amplified by the stillness of the empty gym. One of the students, a girl named Sophie, couldn't contain her curiosity. "Coach, shouldn't we help them?" she whispered. Coach Andrews hesitated. His instincts told him to stay put, but the crying tugged at his heart. If there was a student out there, scared and alone, he couldn't just ignore it. "Stay here," he finally said. "I'll check it out. Lock the door behind me and don't open it unless I say it's safe." The students nodded, fear etched on their faces. As Coach Andrews stepped out of the storage room, Sophie locked the door behind him. The gym was dark, illuminated only by the faint light seeping in through the high windows. The crying continued, coming from the far corner of the gym near the bleachers. "Hello?" Coach Andrews called softly. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The crying didn't stop, but it didn't respond either. Cautiously, Coach made his way toward the sound. His sneakers squeaked softly against the polished floor, the sound unnervingly loud in the silence. As he approached the bleachers, the crying seemed to shift, now echoing from a different part of the gym. "Hey, it's okay," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "You're safe now. Just come out and we'll figure this out together." No response. Coach stopped in his tracks, scanning the gym. The crying was closer now, but he still couldn't see anyone. It was as if the sound was coming from everywhere and nowhere all at once. Suddenly the sound stopped. The silence that followed was deafening, pressing down on Coach like a heavy weight. He turned in a slow circle, his heart pounding in his chest. "Hello?" he called again, his voice breaking slightly. Then he heard it, a faint giggle. It was high-pitched and playful, but there was something deeply unsettling about it. The sound came from the opposite side of the gym, near the storage room where the students were hiding. Panic surged through Coach Andrews. He sprinted back toward the storage room, his instincts screaming that something was wrong. As he reached the door, he heard the giggle again, this time directly behind him. He spun around, but the gym was empty. "Coach?" Sophie's voice came from behind the locked door, trembling. "It's me," he said quickly, knocking lightly. "Let me in." The door unlocked, and Sophie peeked out, her face pale. "Did you find them?" she asked. Coach shook his head. "Number. But I need you all to stay calm and stay inside." As he relocked the door and turned off the light, he realized something chilling. The crying had started again. This time, it was coming from right outside the storage room. The students huddled together, their fear palpable. Sophie clung to Coach's arm, whispering, "What's happening?" "I don't know," Coach admitted, his voice barely audible. For what felt like hours, they sat in the dark, listening to the eerie crying just outside the door. Occasionally, it would stop, replaced by soft giggles or whispers. Finally, the principal's voice crackled over the intercom. "The lockdown has been lifted. Students and staff may now return to their regular activities." Coach Andrews and the students exchanged uneasy glances. None of them felt ready to leave the safety of the storage room, but eventually they emerged. The gym was empty, just as it had been before. There was no sign of the crying child, no evidence that anyone had been there at all. Later, Coach Andrews learned that the rest of the school had experienced no unusual activity during the lockdown. No one else had heard the crying, the giggles, or the whispers. When he shared the story with a colleague, they gave him a knowing look. "You've heard about the girl, haven't you?" they asked. "What girl?" "The one who died in the gym years ago. It was a freak accident. She got trapped under the bleachers during a game and suffocated. Some say her spirit never left." Coach Andrews didn't respond. He didn't believe in ghosts, but he couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had happened in the gym that day was far from normal. To this day, none of the students or staff involved in the incident can forget the chilling cries or the eerie giggles that echoed through the gym during that unforgettable lockdown. Story 3. The Shadow in the Stairwell. It was nearing the end of the school day at Ridgeview High, and the late afternoon sun bathed the hallways in a golden glow. Students and teachers alike were anticipating the weekend, their minds already drifting to plans outside the school walls. Then, without warning, the loudspeakers crackled to life. "Attention students and staff. The school is now in lockdown. This is not a drill." The announcement caught everyone off guard. Teachers scrambled to lock their doors, pulling blinds over windows, while students huddled in corners and beneath desks. Sophia, a junior in Miss Carter's history class, could feel her heart pounding as she crouched under her desk with the rest of her classmates. It wasn't her first lockdown, but something about this one felt different. The principal's voice had sounded strained, almost panicked, and there were whispers among the students that someone had seen a figure lurking near the back entrance of the school. Sophia tried to focus on her breathing, but her attention was drawn to the sound of footsteps echoing in the hallway outside. "Do you hear that?" she whispered to her friend Emma, who was crouched next to her. Emma nodded, her face pale. "It sounds like someone's walking around out there." The footsteps were deliberate and slow, stopping every few seconds as if the person was listening for something. Miss Carter held a finger to her lips, silently urging the class to stay quiet. The tension in the room was suffocating. The footsteps grew louder, then stopped right outside the classroom door. Sophia held her breath, her heart racing. She could see the shadow of someone standing in the narrow window of the classroom door, but the figure didn't move. For a moment, it was completely still, like a statue. Then the doorknob rattled. Sophia bit down on her lip to keep from screaming. Whoever was on the other side of the door was trying to get in. The knob rattled again, harder this time, but the door remained locked. After what felt like an eternity, the shadow moved away, and the footsteps began again, fading down the hallway. Sophia exhaled shakily, but the relief was short-lived. A few minutes later, another sound broke the silence, a faint knocking coming from somewhere above them. It was rhythmic, almost like someone was tapping on the walls with their knuckles. "Where is that coming from?" Emma whispered. "It sounds like the stairwell," Ms. Carter said, her voice barely audible. The classroom was located near the central stairwell, which connected all 3 floors of the school. The knocking continued, growing louder with each passing moment. Suddenly, the sound stopped. For a brief moment, the silence was even more unnerving than the noise. But then a new sound emerged, something much worse. A low, guttural growl echoed through the hallway, sending chills down everyone's spine. It didn't sound human. Sophia's mind raced. Was it an animal? Had someone let a dog into the school? But the growl was too deep, too otherworldly. Ms. Carter's face was pale, her hands trembling as she gestured for the students to stay quiet. The growl was followed by heavy, dragging footsteps, like someone, or something, was moving slowly but deliberately toward the classroom. Sophia's stomach turned as the footsteps grew louder. Whatever was out there was moving with purpose, heading straight for them. And then it stopped. The silence stretched on, broken only by the sound of shallow breathing from the students. Sophia turned her head slightly, peeking out from under the desk to look at the classroom door. Her blood ran cold. The shadow was back. This time, it wasn't standing still. It was moving erratically, shifting and contorting as if whoever it belonged to was writhing in pain or rage. The dark outline flickered and warped, and Sophia could swear it didn't look human anymore. The growling started again, this time accompanied by a sharp, scraping sound, like nails dragging across the door. Sophia's eyes filled with tears, her fear threatening to overwhelm her. She squeezed Emma's hand, clinging to the only comfort she had. And then, as quickly as it had started, the noise stopped. The shadow disappeared, and the hallway fell silent once more. For what felt like hours, the students and Ms. Carter sat frozen, waiting for something, anything, to happen. But there were no more footsteps, no growls, no scraping sounds. Eventually, the loudspeakers crackled to life again. "Attention students and staff, the lockdown has been lifted. You may now resume normal activities." Ms. Carter hesitated, her instincts telling her to wait. But after several minutes of silence, she slowly unlocked the door and peered into the hallway. It was empty. The class filed out cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the eerily quiet school. Sophia glanced toward the stairwell as they walked past, her curiosity getting the better of her. The door to the stairs was ajar, and she could see faint marks on the wall just inside. Against her better judgment, she stepped closer for a better look. "What are you doing?" pulling at her arm. But Sophia couldn't look away. The marks on the wall were deep scratches, as if something with claws had raked across the surface. Her stomach churned as she noticed something else, a faint, dark stain on the floor near the base of the stairs. It looked like Sophia backed away, her heart pounding. Whatever had been in the stairwell during the lockdown, it wasn't human. To this day, no one knows what really happened at Ridgeview High during that lockdown. Some believe it was an intruder, while others insist it was something far more sinister. Sophia never spoke about what she saw near the stairwell, but she could never forget the shadow at the door, the growls, or the scratches on the wall. And every time she walked past the stairwell, she felt a shiver run down her spine, as if something unseen was watching her from the shadows. As we've explored these eerie and unforgettable stories, there's one thread that connects them all: the sheer terror of the unknown. Whether it's a menacing shadow figure at the classroom door, the overwhelming panic of a potentially armed intruder, or the inhuman growls echoing through an empty stairwell, each moment captures the raw fear of being trapped in a lockdown with no escape. Let's revisit one key moment from each story. 1. In Story 1, it was the horrifying realization that the intruder was watching through the classroom window, their face distorted into a chilling expression that still haunts the memories of those who saw it. 2. From Story 2, the emotional climax came when the group of friends bravely ventured into the abandoned hallway, only to discover the unsettling truth that someone, or something, was trying to communicate with them from beyond the grave. 3. Finally, Story 3 brought the chilling revelation of the claw marks and bloodstains in the stairwell, a grim reminder that some things cannot be explained by logic alone. Each of these moments leaves us with one lingering question: what would you do in their shoes? These true accounts show that reality can be far scarier than any fictional tale. It's not just the physical danger, but the psychological toll of facing an unknown threat that makes these lockdown stories so chilling. The stories we've shared today are more than just eerie tales. They're a reminder of how important it is to be prepared and aware in moments of crisis. School lockdowns, whether caused by human threats or unexplained phenomena, test the courage and resilience of everyone involved. The key takeaway here is that fear of the unknown can either paralyze us or push us to act decisively. It's in these moments of uncertainty that we find our strength or our breaking point. Now, it's your turn. Have you ever experienced something strange or unsettling during a school lockdown? Share your story in the comments below. We'd love to hear about it. And if you enjoyed these terrifying tales, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to Hauntline, and click the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Finally, if you're looking for more chilling content, check out our playlist of true horror stories. You might just find your next sleepless night waiting for you there.